Hello, everyone. Welcome to another podcast. It's Ben Lister here. How are you doing? How are you doing today? And welcome to episode 24 of the BL and Friends podcast. Right, let's crack on. As you know, each week I have my friends to talk about their hobbies, their jobs, or their careers. So let's crack on with this week's guest. From all different radio stations, it's broadcaster and mentor to many. It's the one, the only, Chris Buckley. Hello, Chris. Welcome along.
Hi, Ben. How are we today? Are we ready for this?
Yeah, how are you?
I'm good. I'm very good. Keeping myself very busy still in the world of radio, which is lovely. It's I suppose I'm kind of lucky. I started doing this 40 odd years ago. As a child, all I ever wanted to do was to be in radio. I remember from being at school, there was what was on a radio station at the time called Piccadilly Radio, then became Key 103, now Hits Radio. I used to listen to it all the time while I was at school, and they did a kids show, and somehow I got on it. I used to run from school to get the bus at 4:20 and get to the radio station for 5 o'clock where we would record it. And since then, that's all I've ever wanted to do, and that's all I've ever done. I've been in radio since that very day, since the day I left school, which is amazing.
One of my friends did a show from the Piccadilly Plaza at the old superstation, Carl Kingston.
Good old Carl, yeah. I mean, that was an amazing place, really, because it was, it was there from the 70s. It was a bit of an old rundown shopping centre, but it was right in the middle of Manchester, right in the centre of Manchester, really. And I have incredible memories there, working with some great people. From Steve Penk was on breakfast. We had Gary King, Danny Petroni, Scott Mills. The list just went on and on of people who just became celebrities. Chris Evans and I used to do the same job. We were technical operators together. And it was just an amazing place because it was proper radio. It was, we played records, we had tapes, we did editing. And you couldn't record shows then. You couldn't. If you did, you had to record the whole show in its entirety. So that's great memories of Piccadilly Radio. And of course, as times change, technology changes, and I always remember an engineer coming to say to me, "Well, it won't be long before we won't need you presenters. We'll have voice tracking, and we'll have sharing programs." And I said, "Oh, that'll never happen. That'll never happen." But of course, it did, and it has.
Yeah, and also some of my good friends were at Key 103 or just down the water at Century.
Of course, yeah. Although a lot of people went over from Piccadilly Radio to Century. And then that became Real, and then Real became Heart, and how the names of the change and the stations are now Heart. There's just one local show, and the rest are all coming from London now.
Yeah, I think it was Joe Ross who did his show from there. I think it was Joe Ross who used to be on Heart, then he moved to Rock FM.
Yeah, he's done his time there.
And now that show, I think, comes out of the Key 103, the old Key 103.
If I'm right, it either comes out of what used to be Hits, because I used to run the Hits for 2 years before it became Hits Radio. Hits was a large digital station, million listeners, targeting a youth audience. I believe that's the studio now where the breakfast show comes from in the morning, along with lots of other stations. Manchester is a little hub really over at Castle Quay.
Yeah, because they have greatest hits as well.
That's it, yeah.
But I think that Hits Radio do more programming from there than Greatest Hits. Because
the Hits
like
is more Manchester.
People like your Simon Mayers and Matt Goodyear do it from Bauer Publishing or Soho Square, where Absolute and all that is based. They do it in a Bauer complex.
Yeah, that's right. I believe so. It all comes from London, that. And because those people live in London, so it makes sense.
Yeah, and on the afternoon on the main feed, the only presenter who I think does Greatest Hits Radio from Manchester is Debbie Mack.
Yeah, good old Debbie, back there again. God bless her.
Yeah,
Good girl.
she used to be at Century with Rob Charles.
Indeed, yeah. In a time, yeah, they've all moved around, but a lot of them are not around now. There's fewer radio stations now for people, but there are lots of little. There's new stations opening, which I'm really proud to be part of one of those, which is Y01 in New York. Wayne Chadwick and I just got chatting one day, and we were talking about, let's get local radio back. Let's see what we can do, because there's going to be advertisers that can't buy into the greatest hits, and actually they do want local radio. And what a great place to do it in York. So we relaunched the station, we rejigged the schedule, we put a lot of work into the presenters and completely reworked the music. And I'm still working with the guys now. I do a show there, and I'm training and coaching some of their presenters, and I'm just about to look at another big project I'm going to be doing with Y01, and that's a great example of good local radio. You know, they've partnered with the football team in York. They're going to be doing the same with the rugby team. They're on DAB. They're going to get a relay to get further on FM. So you know, it's a proper little radio station. They do great little road shows, and actually they touch the audience. They're very good at being local.
And yeah, and as you say, your mentorship, which we'll go on to in a second, but I never realised you did mentoring for radio presenters, like people like that guy, Simon, the guy who's covering for Howard Pressman this week on one of the BBC.
That's the thing I enjoyed most. So my career
Simon, his name will come to me.
Okay. Well, he does let me know. Morrican?
Yeah.
Simon Morrican. So Simon joined me at Signal Radio when I was there. And I think he was a talented young lad. And he was doing the Total Access show for us. And then he was doing our mid-morning show. And then, he's moved around, and now, of course, he's doing shows on, is it BBC, is it Sheffield or?
Yeah, Sheffield.
Radio Sheffield.
And he does some on Derby as well, because he covers for my friend Steve Jordan from time to time.
And I like Simon. So my career then went from Piccadilly Radio. I joined a radio station then called Sunset Radio, which was the first black and ethnic minority radio station. It's now Capital. But I joined to do breakfast there. And that station, unfortunately, didn't last as long as it could have. Just finances wasn't great. So I went back to Key 103 and then spent a long time there. Then got into producing, becoming the social action producer for Rock FM and its AM station, Radio City and City AM station and Key 103 and their AM station. We did a whole load of social action production and interviews and whatever for that. Before moving to, where did I go then? I've been so many different places. I've launched D106.3 in Chester. We launched the digital side of Heart for Yorkshire, Scotland and the Northwest. That came out of London, the Heart London studios. Then I went to, where did I go? From D to Preston, possibly? No, I went to Essex to run Dream 100 and Dream 102, and that was Chesterfield and Chelmsford, and to launch Town 102 in Ipswich. From there, where did I go? Let me try and remember. Went from Essex to where? Essex to the Chapel, and I was living in Chapel because I was working at Chesterfield, running Peak FM, and we did a lot of great local radio there with Becky and Sean and the team. That was a good way of, again, just hitting the audience and being good at being local. Then I launched Central Radio in Preston for UTV before moving on to Signal Radio for 7 years and taking that station and Signal 1 and Signal 2 to its highest ever combo audience. And that was just by being local, by just understanding the audience and delivering what they want, hiring the right people, getting a great lineup. And then onto the hits, and we ran that for 2 years, where we kind of rebranded it. No, on air we rebranded it, restyled it, made it into what I thought was a great sounding radio station. And now I'm loving what I'm doing. I'm working with a station called Pi in Stockport, where we're doing a lot of training. I'm working with Y01, and I'm doing an awful lot of coaching. And there's a lot of consultancy work that I'm doing for lots of radio stations that I can't talk about because the radio stations don't want people to know what we're doing at the moment. So I'm kept incredibly busy.
Yeah, that covers question 1. Question 2. Who were your broadcast inspirations when you were starting out?
I think not because I was totally. I think more of him now than I did then. But I think Kenny Everett was just someone who did radio different. And I think that's what I've always wanted, and that's what I always try and get from presenters. Is if you're going to be like the others, you're one in a million. You need to stand out, and I used to like standout presenters. I think oddly, people like Greg Edwards that used to be on Capital Radio. I just loved the way he talked. Whether that's right now, but I think it worked then. So there was never. I didn't really. There wasn't. I just like presenters that were different. The ones that stood out. The ones that I felt like they were talking to me. The ones that were interesting, were funny. They didn't mind taking the mickey out of themselves. Not the same old that was, this is presenter. So I think just the ones that stood out and made me think, you know what, you're interesting.
Yeah. And also, and also one of my, and who, some of the good inspirations, one of the inspirations that a mutual friend of ours, David Lloyd, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. David's been around, and I love what they're doing with Boom Radio. I think it's a missing market. All radio stations are going for the same audience. They're going for the 25, 45 and audience, and so everyone's doing the same. And I love what they've done with Boom. I think David's done a brilliant job with that radio station and the team there. I think what I listen to there is a station that you instantly start to become their friend. They've done some great stuff that make you feel like you know the presenters. I mean, most of the presenters are absolute legends. They've all done national radio, probably most of them, or been around for a long time, like Roger Day, who does the evening show. He was the first radio presenter I ever really heard on Piccadilly Radio. And he still sounds, do you know what? He still sounds the same today, all those years, 40, 50 years later, he still sounds as good. Nicky Horn on Drive is great. It's a good sounding radio station. And David himself, I love David's style of presentation on mid-mornings. I think what Boom are doing are something, and you know what, they don't play, I think every song is a surprise, is their tagline. And by the way, it works. I just never know what I'm going to get from that station. Not like many of the globals where you just, there's just a limited playlist, and they just come around, and the presenters doing what they do really on Capital now is sell. Now that we're back out of lockdown, for me, a jock needs to give me more than just, come to our gig, give us your money, and here's another one of the songs we played half an hour ago. I need more than that from a radio station. But some people love it, and it's successful for that.
Yeah. And also you look at the Hits Network as well. And similar thing, they're trying to compete with your globals. And it's good what you're doing at YO1.
Yeah, where would you do that? Well, Global have got it right, haven't they? Global have got the Capital for the youth market, Heart for the mid-range. You've got Smooth for the slightly older, and then they've got all the nationals. So they've got that market covered. There needs to be other competition, and there needs to be other radio stations. So I think Bauer's Saviour is going to be greatest hits radio. Be interesting to see what numbers they come in with at the end of October this month with Radar. They changed a lot of radio stations that were playing all kinds of music and very local into a station that plays oldies. So if I liked mix and I like my local station, and now I've got an oldies station, I'm not sure if I'll stay around, but maybe I will. Who knows? And hits radio, I don't hear it. I don't listen to that station. I don't get to hear it much, so I can't really say anything on it.
What I do know is that Sean Goldsmith does the occasional show on Greatest Hits now.
Yeah, and rightly so, because he was breakfast on the Bauer 2 network, which I used to work on too. And he was great. But I think Greatest Hits Radio are looking for big celebrity names now, which is the in thing, it seems, to radio stations. They want celebrity names. They want TV personalities. They're all going for the big names, where Sean was really well known in his area for being a great presenter. And they call him back to do some cover work, which is fantastic because he's a great presenter, a really good presenter.
Yeah, yeah, he is. Yeah, best presenter, one of the best. I think him and Miss Becky will have a reunion one day.
Well, you know, Becky is doing Radio Sheffield. Sean's doing his bit on Virgin as well, and North Derbyshire Radio at the moment. He's got all little fingers in lots of little pies. I think, you know, when I got to Peak FM, I heard Sean and Becky and I thought, you know, there's a lot we can do with this show, a lot we can do. And we turned that show around. You know, I really loved working with both Sean and Becky. They were great presenters and were really willing to change what they were doing or do better at what they were doing, because sometimes I don't think they realized how good they were. So yeah, it'd be nice to get those two together. But you know, the thing with time is it changes things. And you know, I know now from experience, when I used to bring a few old Piccadilly radio presenters into Signal, that they were great at the days at Signal, but they didn't fit in at Piccadilly Radio, but they didn't fit in at Signal 2. Just as time has changed, and I, you know, I've learned from that. And some presenters are great doing what they do now rather than what they did then.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, brilliant.
Anything else you want from me?
Question 3. What is your favourite part about the job?
Okay, about the job. It's really weird because I'm thinking the job, for most of my life, it hasn't been a job. Yeah, it's paid wages, which is great. And, you know, that's what you like. I love making people better. I get really excited when we put big events together. You know, when the radio station really connects with its audience and it really touches its audience. And I think probably, I mean, you know, at all the radio stations I worked that definitely were local, such as D and Peak, Central, you know, Signal seemed to stand out to me because it was such a big station, and there really wasn't a heart or a galaxy, a heart or a capital close by. We really could own the area, and the audience really connected with the station. They really wanted to be part of it. They trusted the radio station. You know, in the days when people did go to radio for travel news, we were doing it, and we were doing it really well. You know, a lot of things I reworked with the presenters there, and it wasn't just there's the problem on the M6, because there always was. I made sure the presenters knew the area and knew the routes, and a lot of them did. So they'd say, come off at junction 17, and if you go through, you know, this way or that way, you'll probably get there a bit quicker. And it was really about getting connected. We did a lot of great charity things. Bring a Pound to Work Day, which was incredible. We brought the two stations together, which was kind of unheard of. But I'm all about taking risks. You know, for me, I see a lot of programmers now, and it disappoints me because I think a lot of them are textbooks programmers. They fill in the spreadsheets, and they do what they have to do, which is often the industry now. You're just told what to do as a programmer. But I come from the era of the 80s and the 90s where programmers really did run the radio stations, and they made a difference. And you know, the names like David Lloyd, Keith Pringle, Mark Story that I work with, and many, many others, who would actually have the balls to do something different. If it didn't work, it's okay. It didn't work, but have a go. Do something different on the radio. Get your presenters to do something different. Sound different. Make the listeners' ears pick up. You know, have that oomph to say, I think this is what we should do. But I think programming is different now. I think programming is driven from head office. The programmers just put in place what they're told to put in place, which is a different way of programming that I've done. But no, I think just making a difference, making the radio station talkable, make the listeners, we would have listeners driving past Signal to see what we're doing in our car park, or it was just, they would just wanted to be part of it. And I think once you've done that, you've made radio. If you're playing hit after hit after hit and not really talking, and what are you doing? And you're doing what Spotify can do.
Yeah. Yeah, and also you look at different radio stations as well, and yourself as well, because your career's gone through a load of ups and downs, a bit like, similar to John Myers, really.
Well, yeah, in the industry, you have successes and you don't. And I think I've been lucky because most of my radio stations have been successful. My presenters have gone on to be bigger and better. And you know what? Sometimes you don't fit in, and it's time to get out. That's radio too. I've seen that. I've seen that from the very first day I got into radio, which was the early '80s. I would watch the politics inside a radio station where someone just didn't fit in, and it wasn't theirs or anybody else's fault. It was, they had their thoughts and other people had others. So radio can be ups and downs. The fact that I'm still here is amazing for me, and I'm still making a difference. I'm working with some presenters at the moment for some radio stations that we're working with, and we're getting really excited that we're looking at different things that we're going to do. I can't really say anymore because it gives it away, but I'm really excited with the projects I'm working on at the moment in radio. That's it makes me feel like I'm doing what I used to do way back, which I love doing, and that's making presenters better.
Yeah, brilliant. And also, next question 4. How has COVID affected your life and line of work?
COVID's been brilliant for me. I actually caught COVID at the very, 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 very beginning of it 2 years or so ago. So I know what that's like. I wouldn't want that again in a hurry. But what COVID's done is proved everybody wrong. That you don't need to be in a radio station to run a radio station. Now, I love the fact that one of the things I always did in radio stations was have program meetings. And that was every week. I'd either supply lunch or breakfast. And it brought everybody together, all the presenters. And it was the only time they'd talk. And I try and always do it around about 10 o'clock, just after breakfast show. And every radio station I worked at, I did it. No matter whether I had, 60 staff or 6 staff, we still had program meetings. And it brings everyone together. And then they go out and have a chat afterwards. And it just, because at the moment there's many radio stations, and I'm working on 1 or 2 of them, where there's no studio. It doesn't exist. And that's because COVID allowed us to do things online like this. I'm doing this interview with you, and we're miles away from each other, and it can be done. I log on now. My boyhood dream of logging on with a little computer and going in and recording my links and doing my show. It's made us realize that we can do a lot more, and technology has driven the change in radio. And I think it's amazing. And I think it's only just begun, by the way. I think there's so much more to come.
Have you been down to YO1's studio yet?
Yeah, I went in July on the relaunch day. And I love the little studio they've got outside. This is another one, big radio stations, let's say Greatest Hits Radio, you don't see them on the streets. It's not from the days when you used to have buses driving by with the radio station's name on, stations coming from shop windows. And that's what YO1 has done. It's right in the area, right in the middle of the shopping town, right in the centre, right in the centre. And, I was listening to a show with Wayne, and he was there saying, well, it's pouring down with rain, but actually York's looking really busy. That, people walking past the studio in the high street. That's the difference that YO1 can do. And your bigger stations, your Capitals couldn't do that because you've got your breakfast show guy in London. He wouldn't know a clue what's happening in Manchester, Leeds, Bradford, Yorkshire, whatever. They only see London, and they probably never leave London. So for them, London's the only place, and that's what you hear on the radio.
Yeah, one of the best people here for the breakfast show in Capital, the best Capital show breakfast show presenter, in my opinion, was Chris Tarrant.
there's another one. You asked me earlier on, who do I look at? Chris Tarrant was a great breakfast presenter for me. He was entertaining, he was interesting, he was naughty. I heard stories of him coming back from celebrity parties, straight from the party to work. But, that was rock and roll radio. I don't get the rock and roll radio anymore. I think it's all very, very driven by men's in suits and spreadsheets and money and profit. But listening to Chris would make me laugh. I mean, in fact, I remember doing a show on. I was living in London and I was driving up to 210, I think in Reading. No, it was 96 something. It was about an hour away from where I lived. It was one of the GWR stations, and I'd been listening to Chris Tarrant on my journey up from about 8 till about 9. And I remember to be making notes of what he said, because I said, I'm going to do something like that. So I'd take his link and make it my own. So he and his producers were great at finding engaging radio that was interesting to listen to. He had his opinion. He knew how to put his opinion across. It didn't just come from, he didn't read the story he had. He looked at the story, the producers worked with it, and he made it his, and he gave his true beliefs to it. And I love that. And I used to steal loads of it. I mean, that's what I call great radio. No one owns it. So yeah, Chris was a great presenter to look up to.
I agree. Tarrant was a brilliant presenter in his own right, Mr. Tarrant. And I know, and I've interviewed Neil Fox, who worked with him as well.
Indeed. There's another guy who had a great career, let down by stuff that really didn't affect, that's another story. But, yeah, good. Sounds a great
He's back
presenter.
on there now, actually.
Is he? Where?
Nation.
Oh, is he on Nation? Good on him.
Yeah. I was talking to a friend of his a few months ago, Sean Tilley.
Oh yeah, good old Sean. He worked for me for a short while at Signal.
Yeah, because you had people at Signal like Raymond Rose.
Yeah, Ray Rose.
Stu Haycock.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we brought a few people into that station, and that radio station was the birth of many great presenters. Chris Moyles came from Signal.
I thought he came from Radio Air.
He was at Signal originally. He was there.
Because Carl Kingston, my friend Carl Kingston, I'm not sure if you've ever met Carl Kingston.
The name doesn't ring a bell.
Used to be on Radio Air.
Right. No, I don't think I know Carl.
He was the man who mentored Stephanie Hurst and Chris Moyles, and he made Chris Moyles into the man he is today.
Wow.
If you get what I mean, this crazy.
Yeah, I mean, everyone has a mentor, and I think if that was the case, then he's done a good job.
Yeah, and it's brilliant, yeah. And also, you look at people like Stu Haycock. I know he was at Peak as well.
Yeah, he was working for me there for a while.
And he was one of the last presenters. You remember Ray Rose were the last presenters at Signal.
Yeah. Before it became Greatest Hits.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, and now we'll move on to question 5. What advice would you give to young, aspiring broadcasters who are starting out?
Be yourself. This is what I spend a lot of time training for young people now. Never open a microphone with nothing to say. I see it, I hear it, respect the music. There's nothing worse than a presenter talking all over a song. I actually don't want to hear that. I want to hear the song, and you just ruined it. Thanks very much. I'll go somewhere else. But the most important thing is open the microphone with a start, middle, and end. And most presenters just don't have that. What am I going to say at the beginning? What is the content in the middle? And how am I going to get out of it? There's so many presenters try and be comedians and trying the funny line at the end. It's not important. You're not hired to be a comedian. You're hired to be a radio presenter. And by that for me, it's a radio personality. And I just want to hear your personality. I want to hear you and your opinions and your thoughts and your ways and your words. I don't want to carbon copy what's already out there, because it's already there and I can hire them. So for me, it's know what you're going to say when you open the microphone. And the other thing is, who cares? Think about that. Who cares about what you're about to say next? You could just say a whole load of words and it meant nothing. It's a bit like a menu, Afternoon, this is, I don't know, home radio. I'm Chris Buckley. It's 20 past 5. And that's how people start every single link, with a menu. So your listeners get used to it, so they don't hear it. And, be creative with your links. So have your start. Is it important that you back announce the last 3 songs? Probably not, because the listeners might not have even been there. And don't forward sell too many songs ahead. I think for me, you think 10 minutes ahead and 10 minutes ahead only. Every show should be in 10-minute segments, because that's kind of capturing your listener for as much time as you're going to get them. They're not going to be there for 3 hours. They don't care what's coming up in 2.5 hours time, because they're going to be somewhere else and they're probably not going to be listening. So it's about here and now. It's about the 10 minutes that you're doing, and then the next 10 minutes, and then the next 10 minutes. But most important, does the listener care about what you're about to say? Know your audience, talk to them in the language they understand, and deliver it with your own personality. That's what I look for.
Yeah. Chris, that's it for today. Thank you for joining us.
Been my pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure. Hope you all learned something. Thank you for joining me one more time. Please give it up for Mr. Chris Buckley. Don't forget, this will be available on my Wix website and my YouTube channel, so stick around and stay tuned for that. Thank you very much for watching and listening. And that's a